A deafening crack of gunfire echoed across the desolate prairie as Penelope Evans scrambled beneath the overturned wagon, her hands trembling and heart pounding against her ribs like a frantic bird trying to escape its cage. The terrified screams of her fellow travelers had faded into an eerie silence that frightened her more than the chaos of the attack. Blood stained the parched earth around her, mingling with the scattered remnants of shattered dreams and broken promises that had brought them all west. Wyoming Territory, 1868. The journey to a new life had ended in devastation. Penelope pressed a filthy hand against her mouth to stifle her sobs as she peered through a gap in the splintered wagon boards. The raiders had finally gone, leaving nothing but death in their wake. Her family, father, mother, younger brother all lay motionless among the other settlers. 23 souls had set out with hope from Missouri 3 months ago. Now she alone remained. Night fell across the massacre site, and with it came a bone-deep chill that seeped through Penelope's thin dress. She hadn't moved from her hiding place, paralyzed by fear and grief. The familiar constellations emerged overhead, indifferent to the tragedy below. How many nights had her father pointed out those same stars during their journey west? Now he would never see them again. At 22, Penelope had left behind a comfortable life as a schoolteacher to follow her family's dream of claiming land and building something new. Her fiancé had broken their engagement when she chose her family over him. Now, huddled beneath the broken wagon with nothing but the clothes on her back and a small locket containing her parents' portraits, she wondered if she had made the most terrible mistake of her life. Morning came with cruel brightness, illuminating the full horror of what surrounded her. Penelope finally crawled from her hiding place, her limbs stiff and aching. Her once blue dress was now stained brown with dirt and darker patches she refused to acknowledge. She stumbled among the bodies, desperately checking each one, though she knew the truth. No one had survived but her. She collapsed beside her mother's body, gently brushing the hair from her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice raspy from thirst and crying. "I'm so sorry." The sound of approaching hoofbeats sent Penelope scrambling back to her hiding place. Had the raiders returned? She peered anxiously through the gap, expecting to see the same brutal men who had destroyed everything. Instead, a single rider approached cautiously. Even from a distance, she could tell he wasn't one of the attackers. He rode slowly, his posture alert but not threatening. As he drew closer, Penelope could make out his features, a man perhaps a few years older than herself, with sun-darkened skin and a serious expression beneath the brim of a well-worn hat. The stranger dismounted, tying his horse to a broken wagon wheel before surveying the scene with grim intensity. He moved methodically among the dead, checking for survivors, though his expression suggested he expected to find none. Penelope remained frozen in indecision. The stranger might represent safety, but after witnessing such violence, how could she trust anyone? Her throat burned with thirst, and lightheadedness threatened to overwhelm her. She needed help, but fear kept her hidden. The man knelt beside a young boy's body, her brother Timothy, and gently closed his eyes. The unexpected tenderness of this gesture loosened something in Penelope's chest. When the stranger stood and turned toward her hiding place, she made her decision. "Help," she called weakly, struggling to emerge from beneath the wagon. "Please help me." The man whirled around, his hand instantly going to his holstered pistol before freezing mid-motion. Their eyes met across the distance, his wide with surprise, hers blurred with tears and exhaustion. "Good Lord," he breathed, rushing toward her. "You're alive." Penelope tried to stand, but her legs buckled beneath her. The stranger caught her before she hit the ground, his strong arms the first comfort she'd felt since the attack. "Samuel Parker," he said, easing her to a sitting position and offering his canteen. "Drink slowly now." She sipped the lukewarm water, nearly choking in her eagerness. "Penelope Evans," she managed between gulps. "They killed everyone." Samuel nodded grimly, his blue eyes scanning the horizon. "Comanche raiders, looks like. Been hitting settlements all through this territory. My family," she began, but couldn't continue. "I'm sorry, Miss Evans," he said, his voice gentler than she expected from a man of his rugged appearance. "We need to get you somewhere safe. Can you ride?" Penelope glanced back at the bodies of her loved ones. We can't just leave them. Samuel's expression softened with understanding. We'll come back. I promise. But right now, you need food, water, and proper shelter. My ranch is about 3 hours' ride from here. You have a ranch. The question seemed absurdly ordinary amidst such tragedy, but Penelope found herself clinging to this small piece of normalcy. Just a small spread. Been building it up these past 5 years. Samuel hesitated, then added, I was tracking some strays when I saw the smoke from your wagons. Penelope looked around at what remained of the wagon train, her entire world reduced to splinters and ash. There's nothing left for me here, she whispered. There will be time for proper burials, Samuel assured her. But you're suffering from shock and exposure. We need to go now. He helped her to her feet, steadying her when she swayed. Before they left, Penelope insisted on retrieving a few items from her family's wagon: her mother's Bible, her father's pocket watch, and a small bag containing what little money they had brought west. Samuel lifted her onto his horse with surprising gentleness for a man with such calloused hands. He mounted behind her, one arm securing her trembling form as he took the reins with his free hand. Hold on, Miss Evans, he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. It's a rough ride, but I'll get you home safe. Penelope nodded, too exhausted to speak further. As they rode away from the massacre site, she didn't look back. She couldn't bear to see her family grow smaller in the distance, couldn't face the finality of leaving them behind. Instead, she focused on the steady heartbeat of the man behind her and the rhythmic movement of the horse beneath them. The journey passed in a haze of grief and exhaustion. Samuel spoke occasionally, pointing out landmarks or checking on her welfare, but mostly they rode in silence. The vast Wyoming landscape stretched around them, beautiful in its wild emptiness, terrifying in its isolation. By late afternoon, they crested a ridge, and Samuel pulled the horse to a stop. There it is, he said, pointing to a modest homestead nestled in a sheltered valley below. Parker's place. Not much, but it's home. A simple log cabin stood beside a small barn and corral. Beyond them stretched fenced pastures where cattle grazed. A creek wound through the property, lined with cottonwood trees that provided rare shade in the open terrain. It's peaceful, Penelope said, her first words in hours. That it is, Samuel agreed, urging the horse forward down the slope. As they approached the cabin, a dog came bounding out, barking excitedly. Behind it appeared an older woman with silver-streaked hair pulled into a severe bun. Samuel Parker. I was beginning to worry. The woman stopped short when she spotted Penelope. Who's this you've brought? Samuel dismounted and helped Penelope down, supporting her when her legs threatened to give way again. Martha, this is Miss Penelope Evans. She's the only survivor of a wagon train attack. Miss Evans, this is Martha Holbrook, my housekeeper and the closest thing to a mother I've got left in this world. Martha's stern expression immediately softened. Lord have mercy, child. Come inside this instant. What followed was a blur of kindness that nearly undid Penelope completely. Martha drew a bath, while Samuel fetched water. She was given clean clothes slightly too large, but wonderfully free of dust and blood. A bowl of stew was pressed into her hands, and though she had no appetite, Penelope forced herself to eat under Martha's watchful eye. The poor thing, she heard Martha say to Samuel in the other room. What are you planning to do with her? She needs time to recover, Samuel replied. Then we'll see about getting her to relatives, if she has any. And if she doesn't? There was a pause before Samuel answered. Then she stays until she figures out what she wants. Penelope's eyelids grew heavy as exhaustion claimed her. Martha led her to a small bedroom, Samuel's sister's room before she married and moved to Denver, and helped her into bed. Rest now, the older woman said, patting her hand. You're safe here. For the first time since the attack, Penelope believed it might be true. As she drifted into sleep, the image of Samuel Parker's steady blue eyes followed her into her dreams, the first pleasant thing to occupy her mind since the world had ended and somehow begun again in the same terrible moment. The next morning, Penelope woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was and what had happened. Reality crashed back as her gaze fell upon the unfamiliar quilt covering her. She sat up, wincing at the soreness in her muscles, and took in her surroundings properly for the first time. The small room was simply furnished, but unexpectedly cozy. Handmade curtains framed a window overlooking the creek, and a braided rug covered most of the plank floor. A dresser held a porcelain wash basin and pitcher, and a small bookshelf contained more volumes than Penelope would have expected to find in a frontier home. She rose on unsteady legs and poured water into the basin, splashing her face and neck. The cool water revived her somewhat, though the face reflected in the small mirror above the dresser was hardly recognizable, hollow-eyed and pale despite her normally sun-kissed complexion. A knock at the door startled her. Martha entered carrying a bundle of clothing. "Good morning, Miss Evans. I brought you some things to wear. They belong to Samuel's sister, Emma. She's about your size." "That's very kind, but I couldn't." "Nonsense," Martha interrupted firmly. "Emma left these behind when she married. They're just gathering dust otherwise." Penelope accepted the clothes gratefully, a simple brown skirt and cream-colored blouse, along with necessary undergarments. "Thank you, Mrs. Holbrook." "Martha, please." "Mrs. Holbrook makes me sound ancient." The older woman smiled, softening her weathered features. "Breakfast is ready when you are. Nothing fancy, mind you, but hot and filling." After dressing, Penelope followed the smell of coffee and bacon to the cabin's main room. A table was set for three, but only Samuel was present, rising awkwardly when she entered. "Miss Evans," he greeted her, pulling out a chair. "You look better." "Thank you for the clothes, Mr. Parker, and for everything else." Samuel ran a hand through his dark hair, which Penelope now noticed had a slight wave to it. "Samuel, please. And you're welcome, though I wish we'd met under different circumstances." Martha bustled in with a pot of coffee. "Sit, both of you. Food's getting cold." The meal passed in relative silence. Penelope found she had more appetite than expected, cleaning her plate under Martha's approving eye. Samuel ate quickly, his gaze occasionally flickering to Penelope before returning to his food. "I need to ride out to check the herd," he said finally, pushing back from the table. "But first, Miss Evans, Penelope, we should discuss what happens next." Martha tactfully excused herself to the kitchen, leaving them alone. "I made a promise," Samuel continued, his voice grave, "about your family and the others. I've sent word to the marshal in Laramie. He'll gather men to help with proper burials." Penelope nodded, grateful but unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "Do you have family elsewhere? Someone I could contact?" She shook her head. "No one. My father was an only child, and my mother's sister died last winter. There's no one left." Samuel's expression remained neutral, but his eyes reflected genuine concern. "What were your plans?" "Before, my father was taking us to Oregon. He had arranged to purchase land near Salem." Penelope twisted the napkin in her lap. "He was a carpenter by trade. My mother and I were to teach at the local school." "You're a teacher?" "I was in Missouri for 3 years before we left." The memory of her classroom seemed to belong to another lifetime, another person. Samuel nodded thoughtfully. "Truth or Consequences is growing. The settlement's about 20 miles from here. They've been talking about building a proper school." Truth or Consequences? Despite everything, Penelope couldn't help but smile slightly. "That's quite a name. Named by the first settler, old Tobias Murphy. Said life gave you one or the other, and the town should remind folks of that." Samuel's mouth quirked upward. "Folks mostly call it T or C these days. And you think they need a teacher?" Samuel shrugged. "Can't say for certain, but it's something to consider. For now, though." He hesitated. "You're welcome to stay here while you recover and decide what you want to do next. No rush or obligation." The kindness of this near stranger threatened to undo Penelope's fragile composure. "Why are you helping me?" Samuel looked startled by the question. "What else would I do? Leave you out there?" "Many would have," she replied softly. "Or worse." His expression darkened. "I'm not many men, Miss Evans." "No," she agreed. "You're not." A moment of understanding passed between them before Samuel cleared his throat and stood. "I should get to my chores. Martha will look after you. Feel free to rest or explore the property, just don't go beyond the creek alone. Not safe with those raiders still about." After he left, Penelope helped Martha with the dishes despite the older woman's protests. The familiar task was comforting in its normalcy, and Martha's no-nonsense chatter about the ranch and local gossip required little response. "Samuel's a good man," Martha said as they hung the dish towels to dry. Lost his parents' young father to a mining accident, mother to fever 2 years later. Raised his sister from the time he was 17. Worked cattle drives, saved every penny to buy this land. He's accomplished a lot for someone so young, Penelope observed. Martha nodded approvingly. 32 this past April, and more sensible than men twice his age. Never seen him take to someone so quick, though. Penelope felt heat rise in her cheeks. He's just being kind. Kind, yes. But there's kind, and then there's interested. Martha gave her a knowing look. Not that you need to worry about that now, with all you've been through. Just something to keep in mind. The following days fell into a rhythm that helped anchor Penelope amid her grief. She woke early, helped Martha with breakfast, and then occupied herself with small tasks around the cabin. In the afternoons, she often sat by the creek with one of the books from the shelf in her room, though she rarely absorbed the words on the page. Samuel was often absent during daylight hours, tending to his cattle or riding the boundaries of his property. When present, he was unfailingly polite but maintained a certain distance, as if afraid to intrude upon her mourning. A week after her arrival, Samuel returned from Laramie with news. The marshal and several men had gone to the wagon train site and buried the dead. He offered to take Penelope there when she felt ready, but the thought of seeing the graves was still too painful to contemplate. "There's something else," Samuel said during dinner. "I spoke with Reverend Collins and T.C. They are indeed planning to build a schoolhouse, but it won't be ready until spring. However, he mentioned they're holding classes in the church for now, and their teacher, Mrs. Blackwell, is expecting a child in December." Penelope looked up from her plate. "They'll need someone to take her place." Samuel nodded. "The Reverend seemed quite interested when I mentioned your experience. You spoke to him about me?" She wasn't sure whether to feel grateful or presumptuous. "Hope you don't mind," Samuel replied, looking suddenly uncertain. "Thought it might give you options." "No, I appreciate it," Penelope assured him. "Truly, I've been wondering what I should do next." That night, unable to sleep, Penelope slipped outside to sit on the porch steps. The night was clear, stars scattered across the vast Wyoming sky like diamond dust. The familiar constellations brought both comfort and pain, reminders of her father's lessons during their journey west. The creak of the door behind her announced Samuel's presence before he spoke. "Mind if I join you?" She shifted to make room on the step. "Couldn't sleep?" "Rarely sleep through the night," he admitted, settling beside her at a respectful distance. Too many years of night watches on cattle drives. They sat in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the distant lowing of cattle and the chorus of night insects. "The stars seem closer out here," Penelope said finally. "More immediate somehow." "One of the things I love about this land," Samuel agreed. "Makes a man feel small and significant all at once." Penelope glanced at him, surprised by the philosophical turn. "That's beautifully put." Samuel looked embarrassed. "Don't let on to the other ranchers. They'd never let me hear the end of it." A small laugh escaped her, the first since the attack, and felt like a betrayal. Her smile faded immediately. Samuel noticed the change. "It's all right to find moments of joy, Penelope. Doesn't dishonor their memory." "Does it get easier?" she asked, not specifying the grief she meant, knowing he would understand. "Not easier," he said after a thoughtful pause. "Different. The sharp edges wear down some, but the weight remains. You just get stronger at carrying it." The honesty of his answer was more comforting than platitudes would have been. Impulsively, Penelope reached out and squeezed his hand. "Thank you for finding me, Samuel." His fingers tightened briefly around hers before releasing them. "Get some rest, Penelope. I'm riding into town tomorrow. Thought you might want to come along, meet the Reverend." The prospect of leaving the safety of the ranch terrified and excited her in equal measure. "I'd like that," she said, surprising herself with the truth of it. Truth or consequences proved to be larger than Penelope had imagined, though still modest by Eastern standards. A main street lined with wooden buildings, general store, saloon, blacksmith, small hotel, and church formed the heart of the settlement. Beyond stretched clusters of homes and farms, with the occasional ranch house visible in the distance. Samuel helped Penelope down from the wagon in front of the white-clapboard church. She smoothed her borrowed skirt nervously, suddenly conscious of her appearance in a way she hadn't been during her days at the ranch. "Reverend Collins should be inside," Samuel said, offering his arm. The gesture seemed automatic, a courtesy extended without thought, but the solid warmth of him beside her steadied Penelope's nerves. The Reverend, a tall, thin man with kind eyes and prematurely white hair, welcomed them warmly. "Mr. Parker, a pleasure as always. And this must be Miss Evans. I've been looking forward to meeting you." The church's interior had been arranged as a makeshift classroom, with benches serving as desks and a slate board propped against the pulpit. A pregnant woman was erasing chalk marks from the board as they entered. "Mrs. Blackwell, our current teacher," Reverend Collins explained, making introductions. "She's been instructing our children since she and Dr. Blackwell arrived last year." Eleanor Blackwell was perhaps 30, with a friendly face and practical manner. "Mr. Parker mentioned you taught in Missouri," she said, appraising Penelope with interested eyes. "How many students?" 27, ages 6 to 16, Penelope replied. "In a one-room schoolhouse not unlike this." Mrs. Blackwell nodded approvingly. "That's more than we have here, just 19 at present, though more families arrive each month." "What subjects did you cover?" As Penelope described her teaching experience, she felt a spark of her old confidence returning. This was familiar territory, something she knew and loved. By the end of the conversation, both the Reverend and Mrs. Blackwell seemed satisfied. "We can offer room and board with the Wilsons. They have a spare room they've let to teachers before plus a modest salary," Reverend Collins said. "Mrs. Blackwell expects to teach through November, so you would start December 1st, if that suits." "That's very generous," Penelope replied, glancing at Samuel. His expression was unreadable, but he nodded encouragingly. "I would be grateful for the opportunity." Arrangements made, Samuel took Penelope to the general store to purchase necessities. He insisted on paying, brushing aside her protests. "Consider it in advance on your teaching salary. You can repay me when you're settled." The proprietor's wife, Mrs. Jenkins, helped Penelope select fabric for 2 new dresses and other essentials. The woman's curious glances made it clear that news of the wagon train survivor was already circulating. "Such a terrible thing," Mrs. Jenkins said as she measured calico. "And you staying at Parker's ranch. Quite the talk of the town." Heat rushed to Penelope's face. "Mr. Parker and Mrs. Holbrook have been very kind." "Oh, I'm sure. Samuel Parker is the most respected rancher in the county, despite his age. Never a hint of impropriety about him." Mrs. Jenkins leaned closer. "Though plenty of young ladies have tried to catch his eye since he established that ranch." Samuel, examining farming tools across the store, remained oblivious to the conversation. Penelope changed the subject, asking about the town and its residents until their purchases were complete. As they drove back to the ranch, Penelope found herself viewing the landscape differently. What had seemed desolate and forbidding now held a wild beauty, rolling hills punctuated by rocky outcroppings, the distant mountains blue hazed on the horizon. "What did you think of T or C?" Samuel asked, his eyes on the road ahead. "It seems like a good community. Everyone was welcoming." Penelope hesitated. "I'm grateful for the teaching position." Samuel nodded. "The Wilsons are good people. Their daughter married last year and moved to Denver, same as my sister, actually. They'll treat you well." An unexpected sadness washed over Penelope at the thought of leaving the ranch. In just over a week, it had become a sanctuary, the first place she had felt safe since the attack. "I'll miss Martha's cooking," she said lightly, avoiding the full truth. Samuel glanced at her, a half-smile on his lips. "Just Martha's cooking?" The teasing tone surprised her. "And the creek," she admitted. "And the quiet evenings. And—" She stopped, suddenly shy. "And," he prompted. "And your company," Penelope finished softly. "You and Martha have been so kind when I had nothing and no one." Samuel's hands tightened on the reins. "You'll always have a place at Parker's ranch, Penelope, even after you start teaching." The simple declaration warmed her more than it should have. They rode the rest of the way in companionable silence, each lost in private thoughts as the afternoon sun gilded the autumn landscape. October passed in a blur of preparation. Penelope helped Martha with preserving the garden's last harvest and assisted Samuel with minor ranch tasks when she could. The physical work was therapeutic, keeping her hands busy while her heart slowly began to heal. Samuel rode with her to the massacre site 2 weeks after her arrival. The graves were marked with simple wooden crosses, 23 in all. Penelope placed wildflowers on her family's resting places and read passages from her mother's Bible. Samuel stood a respectful distance away, hat in hand, giving her privacy while ensuring her safety. On the ride back, he told her about losing his own parents, his father crushed in a mine collapse when Samuel was 15, his mother succumbing to influenza 2 years later. "Left me with a 14-year-old sister and not much else," he said matter-of-factly. "Worked cattle drives, saved enough to put Emma through school in Denver, then started building this place." "You've done remarkably well," Penelope observed. "Most men would have found it easier to just look after themselves." Samuel shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "Family is family. You do what needs doing." That simple statement, delivered without pretension, revealed more about Samuel Parker's character than 1,000 flowery declarations might have. In that moment, Penelope realized she was developing feelings for him that went beyond gratitude, a realization as terrifying as it was exhilarating. November arrived with biting winds and the promise of winter. Penelope's departure for town grew imminent, and with it came a restlessness that manifested in long walks along the creek when weather permitted. During one such walk, she encountered Samuel repairing a section of fence, his breath visible in the cold air as he worked. "Need some help?" she called, approaching. He looked up, surprise giving way to a warm smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Don't think fence mending was covered in your teaching studies, Miss Evans." "Perhaps not, but I'm quite capable of holding tools," she countered, picking up a hammer from his toolbox. "Unless you'd prefer to work alone?" "Company's welcome," Samuel admitted, returning to his task. "Gets quiet out here, especially in winter." Penelope handed him nails as needed, watching his strong hands work the weathered wood. "Will you manage all right?" "After I moved to town, I mean. Been managing alone before you came along," he reminded her, though without resentment. "Martha keeps things running smooth at the house." "Of course." Penelope felt foolish for suggesting otherwise. "I didn't mean to imply. I know what you meant," Samuel interrupted gently. "And truth be told, the place will seem emptier without you in it." He focused intently on hammering a nail, not meeting her eyes. "You've brought something back that's been missing a while." The confession hung between them, more significant for its understatement. Penelope's heart quickened. "I've felt the same," she admitted. "When I lost my family, I thought I'd never feel at home anywhere again. But here." Samuel set down his hammer, finally looking at her directly. "You don't have to leave, Penelope. Not if you don't want to." "What are you saying?" she asked, hardly daring to interpret his meaning. He removed his hat, running a hand through his hair in a gesture she now recognized as nervousness. "I'm saying this ranch has felt more like a home these past weeks than it ever did before. I'm saying I'd be honored if you'd consider staying. Permanently." Penelope's breath caught. "Samuel, are you?" "I'm not asking for promises," he hastened to add. "It's too soon, I know that. You're still grieving. But the teaching position doesn't start for 3 more weeks. Maybe in that time, you could consider whether there might be a future for us. Together." The raw honesty in his voice moved her deeply. Here was a man who understood loss as she did, who had rebuilt his life through sheer determination. A man who offered not just sanctuary but partnership. "I don't need 3 weeks," Penelope said softly. "I already know I've found something here I never expected to find again. A place that feels right. People who matter." Samuel took a step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "People? Plural? Martha is quite wonderful," Penelope teased, then grew serious. "But yes, Samuel, you matter. More than I thought possible after everything that's happened." He reached for her hand, enveloping it in his calloused palm. "I'm not a poetic man, Penelope. Can't offer fancy words or promises of easy living. Ranching's hard work, and this territory can be unforgiving. But I can promise to stand beside you through whatever comes, if you'll have me." "Samuel Parker," Penelope said, her voice steady despite the emotions threatening to overwhelm her. "I believe that's the most beautiful proposal a woman could hope for." His face lit with a boyish hope that transformed his serious features. "Is that a yes, then?" In answer, Penelope stepped forward and placed her free hand against his cheek. The gesture was bold by any standard, but after facing death and finding unexpected life on the other side, conventional propriety seemed less important than honest feeling. "It's a yes," she confirmed. though perhaps we should court properly before making announcements." Samuel's laugh was low and warm as he covered her hand with his own. "As the lady wishes. Though I warn you, Martha will see through us immediately." "Martha probably knew before we did," Penelope admitted with a smile. He leaned down slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When she didn't, his lips met hers in a gentle kiss that held more promise than passion, a covenant between two people who had lost everything and found something precious in each other. When Samuel finally spoke to Reverend Collins about withdrawing Penelope from the teaching position, the clergyman seemed unsurprised. "Mrs. Jenkins mentioned there might be wedding bells at Parker Ranch before spring," he said with a knowing smile. "I take it she wasn't far off." Samuel, uncharacteristically flustered, confirmed that he and Penelope intended to marry in February, after a proper courtship. The Reverend promised to find another teacher and offered his services for the ceremony whenever they were ready. Word spread quickly through Truth or Consequences. The tragic story of the lone wagon train survivor and the respected young rancher who had rescued her captured the community's imagination. Martha, as predicted, merely nodded when they shared their news, saying only, "About time you figured it out. I was running out of excuses to leave you two alone." December arrived with the first heavy snow, transforming the landscape into a pristine wonderland that glittered under the winter sun. The ranch became a cozy haven against the elements. In the evenings, Samuel taught Penelope about cattle ranching and the business side of the operation, while she helped improve his somewhat neglected account books with her teaching skills. "You're a natural at this," Samuel remarked one night as they reviewed the year's profits. "Maybe we should expand next year, if the weather holds and prices stay strong." "We?" Penelope asked, warming at the casual inclusion. Samuel looked up from the ledger, his expression serious. "Yes, we. This will be your home too, Penelope. Your ranch. Your future. I want you as a partner in everything, not just a wife by title." The declaration moved her deeply. Her former fiancé in Missouri had expected her to abandon teaching once married, viewing her education as a temporary occupation before her real purpose as a wife and mother. Samuel's respect for her abilities and mind was yet another reason she had grown to love him. For Christmas, Samuel surprised Penelope with a small pine tree cut from the foothills and decorated with candles and handmade ornaments. Martha prepared a feast, and they exchanged modest gifts: a hand-knitted scarf from Martha, a leather-bound journal from Penelope to Samuel, and from him to her, a delicate silver ring set with a small pearl. "It was my mother's," he explained as he slipped it onto her finger. "Not technically an engagement ring, but a promise for now. We'll get a proper one in Laramie before the wedding." Penelope examined the simple ring with tears in her eyes. "It's perfect. I couldn't want anything more meaningful." The new year brought continued snowfall and long evenings by the fire. Samuel and Penelope's courtship deepened as they learned each other's habits, preferences, and dreams. They spoke of children, of expanding the ranch, of perhaps building a larger house in a few years. These conversations about the future helped heal Penelope's grief-wounded heart, giving her hope and purpose again. In late January, a Chinook wind brought unexpected warmth, melting much of the snow and creating a brief false spring. Samuel took advantage of the weather to ride into town for supplies and to confirm their wedding date with Reverend Collins. Penelope spent the day helping Martha clean the cabin thoroughly and prepare a special dinner for Samuel's return. When evening fell with no sign of him, the women grew concerned. "He's probably staying over in town," Martha reasoned. "Road might have gotten muddy with the melt." But as night deepened with no word, Penelope's worry increased. "Something's wrong, Martha. I can feel it." The housekeeper's weathered face revealed her own concern, though she tried to maintain a practical front. "No sense borrowing trouble. If he's not back by morning, we'll send word to the marshal." Penelope barely slept, rising at first light to check the road. The sight of a rider approaching sent relief washing through her until she realized it wasn't Samuel, but a stranger. No, not a stranger. It was Dr. Blackwell from town, urging his horse forward with unusual haste. Martha joined her on the porch as the doctor dismounted. "What's happened?" the housekeeper demanded, her usual composure slipping. "It's Samuel," Dr. Blackwell confirmed, his expression grave. "There was trouble in town yesterday. A group of drifters got drunk at the saloon, started causing problems. Samuel stepped in when they harassed Mrs. Jenkins at the store. Penelope's hand flew to her mouth. He's alive, the doctor assured her quickly. But hurt. Took a bad beating before the marshal arrived. He's at our house in town. My wife sent me to fetch you. The journey to truth or consequences passed in a blur of fear. Dr. Blackwell explained that Samuel had suffered several broken ribs and a concussion, along with numerous cuts and bruises. He's tough, though, the physician added. Kept insisting we send word to you that he was all right, even as I was stitching up his forehead. At the doctor's comfortable home, Eleanor Blackwell met them at the door. He's awake and asking for you, she told Penelope. Stubborn man refused laudanum because he wanted a clear head when you arrived. Samuel lay in a small guest room, his face bruised and swollen, a bandage wrapped around his head. Despite his injuries, his eyes brightened when Penelope entered. There you are, he said, his voice hoarse. Sorry about dinner. The attempt at humor broke something in Penelope. Tears flowed freely as she sat carefully beside him, taking his least injured hand in hers. You foolish, brave man. What were you thinking? Wasn't thinking much at all, he admitted. Just saw those men threatening Mrs. Jenkins and acted. There were 4 of them, though. Didn't expect that. The marshal arrested 3, Dr. Blackwell informed them from the doorway. 4th one ran off. They'll stand trial when the circuit judge comes through next month. Samuel winced as he tried to shift position. Doc says I need to stay in town a few days. Don't think I could handle the wagon ride back yet anyway. Penelope squeezed his hand gently. I'm staying with you. Mrs. Blackwell already prepared the other guest room, the doctor confirmed. Martha is welcome too, though she mentioned needing to look after the ranch. Indeed, the housekeeper had already arranged to have the Wilsons' son ride out to tend the livestock in Samuel's absence. Her practical efficiency was a blessing in crisis. The next few days passed slowly as Samuel recovered enough for travel. The incident had unexpected consequences for their relationship, as Penelope found herself caring for the man who had once rescued her. She helped change bandages, read to him when headaches prevented him from reading himself, and simply sat with him during quiet afternoons. Not exactly how I planned our courtship to go, Samuel remarked on the 3rd day, able to sit up for longer periods now. You seeing me at my worst before we're even married. I think it's rather appropriate, Penelope replied, adjusting his pillows. You took care of me at my lowest moment. Now I can return the favor. Samuel captured her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. I love you, Penelope Evans. Have since the day you stepped out from under that wagon and into my life. The simple declaration stole her breath. It was the first time either had spoken the words directly, though their feelings had been clear for weeks. I love you too, Samuel Parker, she whispered. Probably since you closed my brother's eyes with such gentleness when you thought no one was watching. A week after the attack, they returned to the ranch. Winter had reasserted itself in their absence, fresh snow blanketing the landscape. The familiar sight of the cabin with smoke curling from the chimney brought tears to Penelope's eyes, tears of gratitude and belonging. Their February wedding was a modest affair held in the Truth or Consequences Church. The entire community turned out, eager to celebrate something joyful after a hard winter. Penelope wore a simple cream dress that Martha and Mrs. Jenkins had helped sew, with dried wildflowers in her hair rather than an elaborate veil. Samuel, still bearing fading bruises from the fight, stood tall in his best clothes, his face solemn until Penelope walked down the aisle toward him. The smile that broke across his features then was worth all the tragedy and hardship that had led to this moment. Reverend Collins kept the ceremony brief in deference to the cold church, but his words about weathering life's storms together resonated deeply with the couple, who had already faced more than their share of difficulties. You may kiss your bride, the Reverend finally announced, and Samuel did so with a tenderness that brought sighs from the women in attendance. The community provided a celebration at the town hall afterward, tables laden with home-cooked dishes, music from local fiddle players, and more genuine good wishes than Penelope had ever experienced. As Samuel led her in a dance despite his still healing ribs, she marveled at how completely her life had transformed in just a few months. Happy, Mrs. Parker? Samuel murmured against her ear as they swayed to the music. Happier than I ever thought possible again, she answered truthfully, though I still feel guilty sometimes. That I survived when they didn't. That I found joy so soon after losing them. Samuel's arms tightened around her. Your family would want this for you, Penelope. Life continuing. Love growing. It honors their memory that you found the strength to build something new. His understanding, as always, was exactly what she needed. Penelope rested her head against his shoulder, accepting both the grief she would always carry and the joy she had unexpectedly found. The journey back to the ranch that evening, their home now, truly shared, felt like the beginning of something precious. Martha had tactfully arranged to stay with friends in town for a few days, leaving the newlyweds to privacy neither had experienced before. Standing in the cabin's main room, suddenly shy despite weeks of growing closeness, Penelope felt the weight of the transition. No longer a guest, or even a fiancée, but a wife, Samuel's wife. I had planned to carry you over the threshold, Samuel said ruefully, touching his side where the broken ribs were still healing. But I might drop you, and that seems a poor start to married life. Penelope laughed, the tension broken. I think we've had enough dramatic moments. Walking in together seems appropriate. He took her hand, raising it to his lips. Together, then, in all things. Their first night as husband and wife was a gentle exploration, Samuel careful of both his injuries and Penelope's innocence. What might have been awkward instead became a natural extension of the trust and affection that had grown between them since their first meeting. Afterward, lying in the quiet darkness with Samuel's steady breathing beside her, Penelope reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her here. From the devastation of the wagon train attack to this moment of profound contentment, a path no one could have predicted or planned. Spring arrived early that year, bringing renewal to the land and to their lives. The ranch flourished under their joint care, with Penelope proving adept at management and record-keeping while Samuel handled the physical aspects of ranching. They complemented each other's strengths in ways that made the work lighter for both. In late April, as wildflowers carpeted the hills surrounding the ranch, Penelope confirmed what she had suspected for several weeks: she was expecting their first child. Samuel's reaction to the news was everything she could have hoped for, equal parts joy, pride, and tenderness. A child, he said in wonder, his hand resting gently on her still flat stomach. Our child. Martha, upon being told, merely nodded sagely. Thought as much when you couldn't stomach coffee last week. This ranch needs children's laughter. Been too quiet for too long. As Penelope's body changed with the advancing pregnancy, so too did her relationship with the memory of her lost family. The grief remained, a shadow that would never fully disappear, but it was increasingly accompanied by a sense that they would have approved of her new life, her father especially, who had always admired self-sufficient, honorable men like Samuel. In October, almost exactly a year after the attack that had claimed her family, Penelope gave birth to a son they named William Thomas Parker, William for Samuel's father and Thomas for Penelope's. The healthy baby boy with Samuel's dark hair and Penelope's green eyes became the center of their world, a living embodiment of the future they were building together. On William's 1-month birthday, Samuel took Penelope and the baby to a special spot on their property, a gentle rise overlooking the valley, where he had erected a simple memorial stone. For your family, he explained as she read the inscriptions, her parents' and brothers' names carved into the granite. I know their bodies rest elsewhere, but I thought you might want a place here to remember them. To bring William as he grows, to tell him about the grandparents and uncle he never knew. Penelope, the baby cradled against her chest, felt tears spill down her cheeks, not the raw tears of fresh grief, but the gentler ones of remembrance and gratitude. It's perfect, Samuel. Thank you. As they stood together on the hillside, the autumn sun warming their faces, Penelope reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her here. From the darkest day of her life to this moment of profound peace and happiness, a path no one could have predicted or planned. When you found me, she said softly, I thought my life was over. Everything I knew, everyone I loved gone in a single day. I couldn't imagine ever feeling whole again. Samuel wrapped his arm around her shoulders, drawing her and William close against his side. And now, Penelope smiled up at him, this man who had rescued not just her body but her heart and soul. Now I know that love doesn't end with loss. It changes, grows, finds new paths forward. What we've built together doesn't replace what I lost, it honors it. Samuel pressed a kiss to her forehead. You're the strongest person I've ever known, Penelope Parker. I had to be, she replied simply. You gave me something to be strong for. They remained on the hillside until William began to fuss, then walked hand in hand back to their home, the modest cabin that had become the heart of their shared life. As they crossed the yard, Penelope paused to look back at the wide Wyoming sky stretching endlessly above them. Somewhere in that vastness, she liked to think, her family could see her now safe, loved, and moving forward one day at a time. The only survivor, who had found not just shelter but a true home in the aftermath of tragedy. Years passed, and Parker Ranch prospered. William was joined by a sister, Emma Martha, named for Samuel's sister and their beloved housekeeper. The children grew strong in the Wyoming wilderness, learning ranching from their father and receiving an excellent education from their mother, who established a small school on the ranch for neighboring children as well. Truth or Consequences grew as well, becoming a respectable town with a proper school, a bank, and even a small newspaper. Samuel served on the town council, while Penelope occasionally substituted at the school and helped organize community events. Martha remained with them until rheumatism forced her to retire to a small cottage they built near the main house, where she could rock on the porch and spoil the children with cookies and stories. Her place in the household was taken by a young woman from town who had lost her parents, Penelope, insisting on giving someone else the same chance at a new beginning that she had received. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Samuel surprised Penelope with the house he had promised years before, a comfortable 2-story home with plenty of room for their growing family, built on the same property but positioned to capture the best views of the mountains. Do you ever regret it? He asked as they stood on the porch of their new home, watching William and Emma play with their dog in the yard. Staying here instead of continuing to Oregon as your family planned? Penelope considered the question seriously, as she did all things. I regret the circumstances that changed my path, she said finally. I'll always miss my family, but regret this life we've built? Never. She took his hand, the same strong hand that had helped her from beneath the wagon so many years ago. That day, when the raiders came, I thought I had lost everything. But you taught me that life continues, that love grows in unexpected places. Samuel's smile, still capable of making her heart skip after a decade together, was warm with shared memory and enduring affection. Best decision I ever made, following that smoke trail across the prairie. Providence, Penelope suggested, using the word her mother had often employed when discussing life's unexpected turns. Providence, Samuel agreed, drawing her close as the Wyoming sunset painted the sky in brilliant hues. Or maybe just the luckiest wrong turn a cowboy ever took. Whatever name they gave it, both knew the truth that from the ashes of unimaginable tragedy, they had forged something precious and enduring. A family, a legacy, a love that had not just survived but flourished in the challenging embrace of the Wyoming frontier. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the land they had tamed together, Penelope offered silent thanks for the journey that had brought her here, from lone survivor to beloved wife, mother, and pillar of the community. The path had not been easy, but standing in the circle of Samuel's arms, watching their children laugh in the gathering dusk, she knew with absolute certainty that it had led exactly where she was meant to be.